How was Metallica gone from this to this? From the golden era in the 80s and early 90s to the brink of collapse to now one of the most legendary metal bands on the planet with over 40 years of history, let's explore the events, drama, and even lawsuits that have occurred within the band's existence. The year is 1981, and Lars Ulrich has put an advert in the Recycler, a Los Angeles magazine. In that ad, he says he wants metal musicians to jam with. James Hetfield and Hugh Tanner, who are both previously a part of Leather Charm, saw this and answered the ad. Lars would recruit James, and the band officially formed 5 months after they met. Dave Mustaine would join the band as lead guitarist later on. The name Metallica came from Ron Quintana, one of Lars' friends. Ron came up with 2 names for his fan magazine. They were Metal Mania and Metallica. Lars suggested that he use Metal Mania so that Metallica could be reserved for his band. After 5 months, they played their first show at Anaheim, California with their new bassist, Ron McGovney. The new bass player wouldn't last long, as due to conflict between Mustaine and McGovney, he left the band in December. This would quickly resolve as Lars and James found legendary bassist Cliff Burton at a nightclub called Whiskey A Go Go. They were impressed by his skills and performance and offered him to join the band. He initially declined the offer, but he did join on one condition. Metallica had to relocate to San Francisco, and so they did, and that's where it is still based till this day. After that, they began to record their debut album. At this point, it was called Metal Up Your Ass. However, Metallica decided to kick out Dave Mustaine for his alcohol and drug addiction on April 11 after a gig in New York. On that same day, they replaced him with Kirk Hammett, who learned all the band's songs on a flight to New York, which is where they recorded the album. Metallica renamed Metal Up Your Ass to Kill 'Em All for commercial reasons and released their first album on July 25th, 1983. The album's new name comes from Cliff as a response to record distributors. The album cover, which is a bloodied up hammer, also comes from Cliff as he always carried a hammer wherever he went. While it wasn't a commercial success, it helped bring their name into the underground metal space at that time. The album had heavy influences from British heavy metal bands such as Diamond Head, Saxon, Blitzkrieg, and Black Sabbath. Also, when Dave got replaced, he told the band to not use the riffs and solos he created. Despite his warning, they did. This can be seen on songs like The Four Horsemen and The Mechanics, which sound identical. Dave had already written The Mechanics for his former band, but because of Metallica's popularity, it became more widespread than the original. Despite these conflicts, they're now on good terms with Metallica. For the next 2 albums, they relocated to Copenhagen at Sweet Silence Studios. On July 27th, 1984, Ride the Lightning was released. It managed to reach number 100 on the Billboard 200 with 0 radio coverage. The album cover is an electric chair being struck down by lightning. Its name comes from The Stand, a Stephen King novel where a character uses that phrase to talk about execution via electric chair. This was also the same year where they switched record labels from Megaforce labels to Elektra Records. While James is known today as the rhythm guitarist and the band's vocalist, back then he felt uncomfortable doing vocals. He wanted John Bush, the singer of Armored Saints, to take over the role, but he refused to because his band was doing well. On March 3rd, 1986, Metallica released Master of Puppets. It managed to hit number 29 on the Billboard 200 and it was certified gold. The album is titled as such because the hands, aka the master, are controlling the graves, aka the puppets, on the album cover. This album took longer to record than their previous albums as the band had developed more complex songwriting. Fun fact, there's a soldier helmet over here. However, this is where the band takes an unexpected turn. In September 1986, when the band was touring in Sweden, each member drew cards to determine whose bed they would sleep in. Cliff Burton won this and chose to sleep in Kirk's bed. Near sunrise, the tour bus slipped on ice, lost control, and flipped several times. All but one member survived, that one member being Cliff Burton.
And I heard everyone screaming except for Cliff. And I thought, oh my God, something's wrong.
Seeing the bus driver just, freaking frantic.
And I turned around and I saw Cliff's legs sticking out from underneath the bus.
I went to, pull him out, wake him up or whatever. It's like, he's not moving.
He just got thrown out the window and boom, the bus landed on him and basically by all accounts. I mean, he never woke up.
Despite the loss, the band carried on and hired Jason Newsted. Their next album was And Justice for All and was released on September 7th, 1988. It reached number 6 on the Billboard 200 and was certified platinum for the next 9 weeks. The album's name comes from the last 4 words of the Pledge of Allegiance, and the cover shows Lady Justice being torn down by various ropes with money flowing from her scales. The album had a darker sound compared to the previous 3 albums. This could have been influenced by Cliff's sudden death and how the band responded to it. This album also had some criticism for the sound production. People complained that the mix sounded dry, with Lars' drums not thumping, heavily scooped guitars, and most famously, the lack of Jason's bass lines.
I wanted to take And Justice for All and make Master Puppets sound like a demo. I mean, that was my goal. But they wanted a different direction. They wanted more of a garagey direction. Lars had a specific way how he wanted his drums to sound. He would actually bring in pictures of an EQ setup. And so I walk in, Lars goes, yeah, I'm happy, and everything like that. And I listened to it, I said, this sounds like I hate the sound. And he goes, okay, now the bass. I said, great part. All right, I want you to drop the bass level down in the mix where you barely audibly can hear it. I thought it was a joke. So I did that. And then they said, all right, drop it down another 6 to 8 dB. I looked at Hetfield like this. I said, is this guy serious?
The following year, Metallica won a Grammy for the song One and filmed a music video for it. In the music video, they mixed parts of their performance with another movie called Johnny Got His Gun. This would then air on MTV and become one of the most popular videos on there. On August 12, 1991, Metallica released the Black Album. For this album, they hired a different producer by the name of Bob Rock, who's worked with bands like Aerosmith and Bon Jovi. Due to the new producer, the band also had a new sound. It has slower songs and a more quote-unquote commercial sound. Even if old fans disliked that, this album was by far the most commercially successful. It debuted as number 1 in over 10 countries, sold 650,000 copies within the first week, and was certified platinum 16 times. It contains songs like Enter Sandman and Nothing Else Matters, which are their most streamed songs on Spotify, along with many others. After that success, they then went on tour for 3 years straight. They even went to the Monsters of Rock concert in Moscow, where they played in front of 1.6 million people. After the tour, the band went on hiatus during the summer. After that, they went back to writing songs in 1996. These years are what I like to call the dark ages of Metallica, as they weren't as well received as they once were in the previous section. On June 1st, 1996 and November 18th, 1997, Load and Reload were released respectively. These albums had a much different sound than their previous records. Instead of continuing the thrash metal sound that they established, they decided to play slower, tune their guitars down a half step, and had a more alternative rock sound. Even the band image changed. For example, the logo changed and the band members cut their hair. Despite these changes that many fans didn't like, both albums were a commercial success, hitting number 1 on the Billboard 200. Things would take a turn when 2 friends from Northeastern University founded Napster in 1999. Napster was a popular file sharing system that specialized with MP3 files. This allowed users to download songs that you usually had to pay for free. This turned music from being collectible to being disposable. Obviously, piracy is illegal, so Metallica and other artists took action. When Metallica found that a demo of their song I Disappear got leaked and their entire discovery was free to download, it's quite an understatement to say that they were pissed off, as they filed lawsuits against Napster in the year 2000. Metallica accused Napster of 3 crimes. 1. Copyright infringement. 2. The unlawful use of digital audio interface devices, and 3. The Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, or RICO for short. Lars to be in charge of the case and provided a statement regarding copyright infringement on July 11.
Napster hijacked our music without asking. They never sought our permission. Our catalog of music simply became available for free downloads on the Napster system. If you're not fortunate enough to own a computer, there's only one way to assemble a music collection the equivalent of a Napster user: theft. Walk into a record store, grab what you want, and walk out. The difference is that the familiar phrase, file's done, is now replaced by another familiar phrase, you're under arrest. Also keep in mind that the primary source of income for most songwriters is from the sale of records. Every time a Napster enthusiast downloads a song, it takes money from the pockets of all these members of the creative community.
Metallica wanted $10 million in damages at $100,000 per illegally downloaded song. To monitor Napster, Metallica hired NetPD, an online consulting firm, to create a list of all the Napster users that illegally shared their songs. That list was comprised of over 300,000 users and was 60,000 pages long. Each user would get banned from using Napster, and sharing Metallica songs also got banned. The final verdict came in March 2001 from federal judge Marilyn Hall Patel in favor of Metallica. She ordered Napster to put a filter on the program or be shut down within 72 hours. Napster tried to reach an agreement for $94 million where they could block songs from certain artists who don't want their songs to be shared. However, this didn't work out, and they ultimately filed for bankruptcy in 2002. Metallica wasn't the only one suing Napster. Dr. Dre and a handful of other record labels filed their own lawsuits, causing a ban of over 200,000 more Napster accounts. Metallica's decision to take on this court case was heavily disapproved by its fans. For example, Nikki Sixx, the bassist of Motorhead, called Metallica hogs because they make enough off t-shirts and concert events and other forms of corporation that is not acceptable behavior for an artist to do that with their fans. Dave Grohl of Foo Fighters also has something to say about this.
The thing about music is that music should be available to anybody that wants to hear it. There should be no such thing as a price tag on music. I don't want to turn on my radio and have to put a nickel in it to hear Metallica. Like, I don't want to have to pay to hear music. Like, I mean, and you know what? I understand where some people come from when they say, Napster is taking money away from me. But you know what? When it's someone that sold 50 million records and they got $50 million and they're about pennies, you, man.
If things couldn't get worse, Jason Newsted left the band on his own accord. The reason why he left is because when he wanted to do a side project called Echo Brain, Hetfield opposed him working on it. His reason for doing so is that when someone does a side project, it takes away from the strength of Metallica. Hetfield being overprotective of Metallica's brand image resulted in Jason leaving the same day Cliff did. If it couldn't get worse, it did. In July of 2001, right before the recording of their new album, James Hetfield entered rehab to treat his alcoholism and other addictions. He stayed in rehab until December of 2001, but not everything was back to normal, as James's work hours were limited to only 4 hours so that he could spend the rest of the day with his family. Despite that, a new album would be released on June 4th, 2003 called Saint Anger. This album was infamous for Lars' snare sound. Lars achieved this sound by disabling the snare wires, causing it to sound more like a pan. I mean, take a listen for yourself. Just like how the snare sounded terrible, there are also no guitar solos. While most people critiqued it for its drums and lack of guitar solos, others called it raw and rocking. You might be wondering, if Jason Newsted left the band back in 2001, who's filling in for bass? That person was Bob Rock. The same Bob Rock that produced the Black Album was the bassist on Saint Anger. Since Metallica can't always have Bob Rock on bass, they hired auditions for a new bass player. After 3 months of auditioning, they found Robert Trujillo. In 2006, after having Bob Rock produce their albums for the last 15 years, Metallica decided to get a new producer by the name of Rick Rubin. On September 10th, 2008, Death Magnetic would officially release. The reason why I say officially is because a French record store accidentally began selling copies 2 weeks before the planned release date of September 12th. Metallica didn't really care about this, however. This album had a new sound, just like Load and Reload. However, it was for the better. Instead of diverging from their 80s thrash sound, they went back to it. This meant faster songs and a more classic sound. In return, many people liked it, with it debuting as #1 on the Billboard 200. This album was named as such because James says thinking about death Some people are drawn towards it, just like a magnet, and other people are afraid of it and push away. However, it did have issues with the sound production. It was so compressed to the point where the mix had audible distortion. If you don't know, compression is an audio processing technique where the quiet parts become louder and the loud parts become quieter, hence compressing the sound. This reduction in dynamic range, if done correctly, can allow for more details to be heard and a more consistent volume. However, if overdone, like on this record, it can cause audible distortion and the music to sound squashed. People say that this is the result of the loudness war, which is a trend to make songs/recordings as loud as possible. Fans wanted a remastered version of the album. However, Metallica and Rick Rubin refused to make one, as complainers were in the minority, and the album had overwhelmingly positive reviews. On April 4th, 2009, Metallica got admitted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and would go on tour until 2010. Fun fact, Lars is the first Danish person to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In 2013, the band released a movie called Through the Never, named after the 7th song on the Black Album. It's about a road crew member's adventure, intercut by camera footage from a show in Vancouver and Edmonton in August of 2012. In December of that year, they played a show called Freeze 'Em All, where they performed in Antarctica. This makes Metallica the only band to perform on all 7 continents. On November 18th, 2016, Metallica released Hardwired to Self-Destruct. Just like Death Magnetic, it was a return to their thrash sound, and it was also successful. It hit #1 on the Billboard 200, and the band toured in the summer of 2017 at various US and Canadian cities. The album's name comes from James Hetfield.
Somebody said to me the other day, and it stuck with me, hardwired to self-destruct. Like, no matter what you do in your life, you're really trying to not go down that path that you're maybe hardwired to do.
Right. When 2020 hit, the band couldn't tour anymore and had to stay at home. While at home, they began a series called Metallica Mondays, where they live stream past shows to relieve some boredom. This series would end on May 2021 to focus on their All Within My Hands Foundation, which raised over $300,000. While in quarantine, they also released Blackened 2020, which is an acoustic cover of Blackened from their And Justice for All album. From November 2022 to March 2023, the band released 3 singles from 72 Seasons, their next album. They were released in this order: 1. Lux Eterna on November 28th, 2022, 2. Screaming Suicide on January 19th, 2023, and 3. If Darkness Had a Sun on March 1st, 2023. They would also release the music video for 72 Seasons, the song, on March 30th, 2023. The full album would be released on April 14th of that year. It received very positive reviews from critics and debuted as #2 on the Billboard 200. This broke the streak of debuting as #1 that's been happening since the Black Album in 1991. In Immorta, which is the last song from the album, is currently the band's longest song at a whopping 11 minutes long. As of now, 72 Seasons is their most recent album, but I'm sure that's subject to change. Before I end the video, I also want to mention that Metallica collaborated with the San Francisco Symphony to create S&M. This created a mix of metal music with classical music, which sounds pretty interesting. Also, since Cliff was a fan of classical music, especially Bach, I'm sure he would have loved these shows/records. So that's the history of Metallica, starting from a couple of young adults playing at local bars to now playing in front of thousands of people. The rise to fame is an interesting story filled with numerous conflicts. Their music has influenced many bands and has solidified them as being a prominent member of the Big Four. Love or hate them, they are undoubtedly one of the most popular metal bands ever. If you've made it to the end of the video, consider subscribing.